The rain had started without warning, the kind that soaked the streets and made the whole neighborhood feel smaller and quieter, and Emily Parker sat alone in the living room, listening to the soft ticking of the clock while her husband's side of the couch remained empty, Daniel being away on a work trip in Montreal, leaving the house unusually silent for the first time in weeks, and she tried to focus on a movie but her thoughts kept drifting, thinking about how life had settled into a calm routine that felt safe but also strangely fragile, as if one unexpected moment could tilt everything off balance, and it was during that uneasy calm that she heard a knock at the front door, slow and unsure, which made her heart jump because no one ever visited that late, and when she opened it she found Lucas standing there, soaked from the rain, his hair damp, his jacket heavy with water, and his eyes carrying a tired look that immediately stirred concern in her, and he apologized quickly, explaining that his car had broken down near the highway and his phone battery had died, and Emily stepped aside without hesitation, telling him to come in before he caught a cold, feeling that familiar instinct to care for him rise naturally the way it always had, even though Lucas was not a child anymore but a young man trying to find his place in the world, and as he stood in the warm light of the hallway, she noticed how much he had changed over the years, taller, more serious, carrying himself with a quiet weight that made her wonder what burdens he kept to himself, and she handed him a towel, made him tea, and guided him to the kitchen where the sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the pauses in their conversation, and they spoke casually at first, about the weather, about Daniel's trip, about how bad the traffic must have been, but beneath the simple words there was a tension neither of them named, a feeling that the night was not as ordinary as it should have been, and when Lucas finally sat down, wrapping his hands around the warm cup, he let out a long breath as if he had been holding everything in for days, and he said softly that he did not know where else to go, that he felt stuck lately, unsure of his direction, and Emily listened closely, offering gentle words, reminding him that everyone feels lost sometimes, even adults who pretend they have everything figured out, and her voice was calm but her heart was racing, because she sensed his trust, his openness, and it made her aware of the thin line she was walking, wanting to support him without stepping beyond what was right, and as the rain grew heavier outside, the house felt closed off from the world, creating a private space where time seemed to slow, and Lucas spoke more freely, admitting he felt alone even when surrounded by people, that expectations from family and work pressed on him constantly, and Emily nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit, because she too had known loneliness, even within a marriage, and when she told him he could stay the night since the storm was not easing and Daniel would not be home until the weekend, Lucas hesitated only a moment before agreeing, thanking her with a look that held gratitude and something deeper she quickly pushed away, and as she showed him the guest room, the hallway light casting soft shadows on the walls, Emily felt an unfamiliar awareness of his presence beside her, not inappropriate, not intentional, but powerful enough to unsettle her. And when Lucas paused at the door and told her she had always made him feel welcome, that the house felt warmer because of her, Emily smiled but felt her chest tighten, realizing that this simple act of kindness had opened a door inside her she did not want to look through, and as she returned to her bedroom alone, listening to the storm and staring at the ceiling, she understood that something had shifted, quietly and irreversibly, not through action but through emotion, and though nothing wrong had happened, she sensed that the night had planted a seed of conflict she would soon struggle to ignore. Morning came too quickly, and Emily woke to the sound of rain still falling, lighter now but steady, as if the night had not fully let go of its secrets, and she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the strange tightness in her chest, reminding herself that Lucas was simply a guest, her stepson, someone she cared for in a safe and respectful way. Yet when she heard footsteps in the hallway, her heart reacted before her thoughts could catch up, and she forced herself to move, to start the day like any other, making coffee, opening the curtains, pretending that nothing about the house felt different, but the air carried an awareness that followed her into the kitchen, where Lucas stood by the counter, clean and rested but still serious, thanking her for letting him stay, and she replied warmly, keeping her tone light, though every word felt carefully chosen. And they spoke about practical things, his car, the repair shop, how long it might take, but even simple talk felt loaded, and Emily noticed how he avoided her eyes while speaking, as if he too was trying to keep control over thoughts that refused to stay quiet, and after breakfast she suggested they both focus on their own tasks, hoping distance would bring clarity, yet the house was small, and their paths crossed often, in the hallway, near the window, by the sink, each moment brief but lingering longer in feeling than in time. And as the day moved on, Lucas received a call confirming the car part would not arrive until the next evening, and Emily nodded, telling him it was fine to stay another night, even as her inner voice warned her to be careful. And the afternoon passed in restless silence, broken only by the sound of typing and distant traffic. And when evening came they shared dinner again, sitting across from each other, speaking about memories from years before, about Daniel, about changes in life, and Lucas admitted he often felt pressure to live up to expectations that were never clearly spoken, and Emily listened closely, offering understanding, telling him it was okay to move at his own pace, that worth was not measured by speed or success. And he looked at her then with a gratitude that felt heavier than before, as if her words reached a place inside him few others had touched. And in that moment Emily realized how easily emotional closeness could grow when two people felt seen, and the realization frightened her, because it made her question her own feelings, whether they were born from compassion or from something more complicated. And later that night, while washing dishes together in silence, their hands brushed accidentally, a small contact that sent a sharp awareness through her, and she pulled back quickly, apologizing, while Lucas stepped away as well, his expression tense, and neither mentioned it. Yet the silence that followed was louder than any conversation, and Emily spent that night wide awake, replaying moments, measuring glances, wondering when care had begun to blur into longing. And she understood that the danger was not an action but an emotion, in the quiet connection forming beneath their restraint. And the next morning Lucas told her he should leave as soon as the car was ready, his voice firm but strained, and Emily agreed, relief and sadness mixing together, knowing that distance was the only way to protect what mattered. Yet as she watched him prepare to go, she felt the weight of an unspoken truth settle between them, something neither would confess but both carried. And she realized that helping him had been easy, but guarding her heart would take far more strength than she expected. The day Lucas planned to leave arrived with clear skies that felt unfair after the emotional storm inside the house, and Emily moved through the morning with a strange heaviness, trying to act normal while every sound felt sharper than usual, the closing of doors, the scrape of a chair, the quiet pauses where words should have been. And Lucas packed his bag slowly, as if delaying the moment would make it easier, while Emily busied herself in the kitchen, not trusting herself to stand still. And when they finally sat across from each other, the space between them felt wider than the table, filled with everything they had not said. And Lucas spoke first, telling her the repair shop had called and the car was ready, his voice steady but his eyes tired. And Emily nodded, offering a polite smile that did not reach her heart, telling him she was glad things worked out. Yet the relief she expected never came, only a quiet ache she could not explain. And as he carried his bag to the door, memories of the past days rushed through her mind, the late talks, the shared silences, the way he had looked at her when he felt understood. And she realized how deeply those moments had settled inside her, not as events but as feelings. And when Lucas paused at the door, turning back to her, the air grew heavy again, and he said softly that staying there had reminded him of things he was not ready to face, that being around her made him feel calm and unsettled at the same time. And Emily felt her chest tighten, knowing exactly what he meant, yet she chose her words carefully, telling him that some feelings appear to teach us something, not to be followed but to be understood. And Lucas listened, nodding slowly, his jaw tight as if holding back more, and for a brief moment it seemed he might say something that could change everything, but instead he simply thanked her for her kindness, for listening when no one else had. And Emily replied that she would always care about him, meaning it in the safest way she could. And when he finally left, the sound of the door closing echoed through the house, leaving behind a silence that felt deeper than before. And Emily stood there long after, staring at the empty space, realizing that nothing physical had happened, yet something inside her had shifted permanently. And the following days were no easier, because absence did not bring relief, only reflection. And she found herself replaying conversations, wondering when concern had turned into emotional closeness, when respect had begun to mix with longing. And she struggled with guilt, not because she had crossed a line, but because she had come close enough to see how fragile her boundaries truly were. And when Daniel returned home, cheerful and unaware, Emily welcomed him with warmth, listening to his stories, sharing smiles, yet feeling like a part of her remained locked away, and at night she lay beside him, staring into the dark, asking herself hard questions about loyalty, about honesty, about the quiet emotional needs people carry even in stable lives. And weeks passed before she heard from Lucas again, a simple message thanking her once more and saying he hoped she was well, and Emily replied with kindness but restraint, choosing distance as an act of responsibility rather than rejection, and over time the sharpness of the feelings softened. But they never fully disappeared, becoming instead a quiet reminder of how easily hearts can be tested, and Emily came to understand that the hardest choices are often invisible to others, made in silence, measured not by what we do but by what we choose not to do, and though life slowly returned to normal on the surface, she carried the weight of that lesson with her, knowing that some emotional truths are meant to be acknowledged and then gently set aside, not acted upon, but never forgotten. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly and without asking permission, and Emily settled back into her routine with Daniel, returning to familiar patterns that looked the same on the surface but felt different inside her, because the house no longer felt untouched by memory, and every room carried a faint echo of the days Lucas had stayed, not as clear images but as emotions that rose unexpectedly, and she worked harder than before to be present, to listen closely to her husband, to invest herself fully in the life they had built, not out of fear but out of choice, reminding herself daily that commitment was not just about love but about intention, and Daniel noticed a change in her, a deeper thoughtfulness, a softness mixed with restraint, though he could not name it, and Emily did not explain, knowing some truths protect more than they heal when spoken, and seasons passed, holidays came and went, and Lucas remained distant but respectful, sending brief messages on birthdays, appearing occasionally at family gatherings with polite smiles and careful distance, and each time Emily saw him she felt a quiet recognition pass between them, a shared understanding of something unspoken that no longer demanded attention but still existed, like a scar that had healed without fading, and as years went by, Emily found peace not by forgetting but by accepting what the experience had taught her, that emotional boundaries are tested not in moments of weakness but in moments of kindness, when caring too deeply can quietly blur lines if one is not honest with oneself, and she learned to honor feelings without obeying them, to acknowledge longing without feeding it, and that lesson made her stronger, more aware, and more grounded in who she chose to be. And one evening, long after the memory had softened, Emily sat alone on the porch watching the sunset, reflecting on how easily life could have taken a different turn had she acted differently, had she spoken words she had wisely held back, and she felt gratitude not for the struggle but for the restraint that had protected everyone involved. And when Lucas eventually introduced his partner at a family dinner, Emily felt a surprising sense of relief rather than loss, seeing him happy and settled, knowing that whatever had once passed between them belonged firmly in the past, where it could no longer cause harm. And as Daniel laughed beside her, unaware of the quiet journey she had taken within herself, Emily understood that the most meaningful stories are not always the ones shaped by dramatic choices, but by the ones defined through self-control, patience, and respect, and she accepted that helping Lucas that night had revealed a hidden truth about her own emotional needs, a truth she had faced without letting it change her values, and though she sometimes wondered how close she had come to a different life, she no longer felt regret, only clarity, because she had chosen responsibility over desire, silence over confession, and stability over momentary comfort, and in that choice she found a deeper sense of peace, knowing that some connections are meant to teach, not to last, and some moments are meant to test, not to break us, and Emily carried that understanding forward, living fully, loving deeply, and guarding her heart not with fear but with wisdom, confident that the quiet decision she made would remain one of the most important choices of her life.